Start with the economy. So since Trump has been in office, unemployment has continued to go down. Job creation has stayed at a pretty high clip. On the other hand, there's an issue with wages, and just recently, the federal government came out with its deficit numbers for the last fiscal year, and it showed there's about a $1 trillion deficit, which is the highest since 2012. So I will start with Charlie. Do you think the Trump economy is doing well for the middle class, given those numbers, doing well for the next generation that might inherit that deficit? And do you think the tax cuts are just a short-term boost of, is it like a sugar rush, or is it going to lead to long-term prosperity?
Right. I mean, look, we have the best economy in American history thanks to President Donald Trump. And look, we're seeing the lowest ever black unemployment rate, lowest Latino unemployment rate, lowest Asian American unemployment rate, lowest black poverty rate. We're seeing wages actually going up. So under President Obama, for the last 3 years of his presidency, the European economy and the American economy were basically the same, almost to the 5 decimal points. You couldn't distinguish between the two. The day President Trump got inaugurated, all of a sudden you saw explosive economic growth. So under the last 18 months of President Barack Obama, we had about 1.5% GDP growth. President Trump doubled that after his first year in office, and we got even more than that. We went as high as 4.2% in one quarter last year. As far as average earnings, so under President Obama, the last 23 months of his presidency, average wages went up about $1.30 an hour, more or less. Under President Donald Trump, over 2.5 years in his presidency, wages have gone up to $2.30 an hour, almost a dollar increase, about 40% on average. Every single metric you could possibly look to in the economy is going in a positive direction. And it's because of renewal of the American spirit, deregulation of our economy, and the other thing that we don't talk about enough, and something that, Kyle, I think you'll appreciate because we both don't like foreign occupation and foreign war, President Trump has finally made this country energy independent, that we don't have to buy our oil as much from the Middle East thanks to what? Fracking, natural gas, and innovative technology that a lot of people on the left want to outlaw and completely get rid of. We are now, for the first time in American history, exporting more oil than we are importing. So we don't have to buy oil from maniacs in the Middle East that hates our guts and entire civilizations and theocracies that want to destroy America. And that's a very positive thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. And look, the broader picture is here, is that the economy is so good that even President Barack Obama is trying to take credit for it, right? I mean, we are seeing an economic renaissance, the likes of which is historic and unprecedented. We were through an economic malaise under President Barack Obama, and now we are seeing prosperity that is totally amazing. And whoever's the credit for it, Kyle, we can debate that back and forth, but the results are not to be debated. I have a packet of the most amazing economic success you could possibly imagine. It's a good thing that we have the lowest black unemployment, Latino unemployment, Asian unemployment, disabled unemployment, lowest ever black poverty rate. My favorite statistic, I'll close with this, 6 million people are no longer on food stamps, and now in the labor market, that's 6 million people that don't have to go get food stamps anymore, thanks to President Donald J. Trump.
All right, Kyle, your response.
Okay, so there's a lot there. I'll try to make my response relatively short here. I don't think the way that we measure the economy, the metrics that are typically used by mainstream media, I don't think they're good metrics. I think they're absolutely terrible metrics. I think that when you look at something like the unemployment rate, okay, I'll give him partial credit for that unemployment rate going down, but then you also have to give Obama partial credit for that as well, because he did dig us out of the hole of that Great Recession. But basically, listen, the point is, Donald Trump used to bring up this thing called the U6 unemployment rate. Now, the U6 unemployment rate is a more accurate reflection of what the real unemployment rate in the country is. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember back to the primary season, he'd be like, you know, the actual unemployment rate is really more something like 10%, 15%. He would always kick that number up because Donald Trump was kind of right. The way we calculate it is nonsense. So when you look at the real unemployment rate, I actually should say the official one is 3.5%. The U6 unemployment rate is 6.9%, so it's significantly higher than what's often touted by mainstream media. And you have to include the discouraged workers, you have to include the people who work on and off, and people who are part-timers who want to be full-timers. So there's this whole category called the underemployed, and that's another 22 million people. You have 8.6 million people officially categorized as working poor in this country. You have, this fact always gets me, I think it's incredible that 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 78%. That's nothing to write home about. And thank you, yes. And listen, half of workers make $30,000 a year or less, and 40% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. So actually, what I would have agreed with you on if you presented it this way is, man, Obama kind of sucked, but so does Trump.
So let's look at these numbers. Number one, the U6 unemployment is lower under Trump than it was under Obama. So even if I were to take your argument, the U6 unemployment is lower. Number two, we have more job openings than we have actually people to fill it. And because of that, we are seeing wages go up. And I could prove it. So this is one of the most amazing statistics. Average income for under Bush, Obama, and Trump. So under 8 years of George W. Bush, average middle-class income, because you focus on middle-class earners, people that need money for an emergency, the backbone of our country, middle-class income went only $500 up under 8 years of President George W. Bush. It went up $1,000 over 8 years under Barack Obama, $5,000 in 2.5 years under President Donald Trump. $5,000. This is middle class. These are middle class folks. So, sure. Kyle, you're going to find agreement that people are indeed still trying to get ahead in America. I'm not going to say we're living through perfection, but boy, has President Donald Trump created the best economy in American history, especially for middle class earners. And I'll say, you mentioned the working poor. So how does one help the working poor? Is it by taking money from job creators and entrepreneurs and risk takers? You might say yes. I would say no. I'd say the best way to help people that honestly need the help in our society, and President Donald Trump has demonstrated this, is through a robust and booming economy. And that's why one of the most amazing statistics is the poverty rate. And I mentioned that. The black poverty rate is the lowest it has ever been. Poverty is a holistic measurement of income, of debt, of likelihood to graduate high school. The entire picture, it's the lowest it's ever been in recorded history in the black community. And that's something really to be said, Kyle.
I don't play identity politics, so don't bring up black or Asian. Just tell me what the actual rate is.
Well, look, these are numbers from the federal government. That's perfectly fair. So how about this? How about urban unemployment is the lowest it's ever been? It is. So
that's the same way of, that's just saying the same thing in a different way.
You want to, you say don't want to play identity politics? Perfectly fine. These are numbers that are, by the way, published by the Congressional Budget Office. These are numbers, and by the way, Kyle, I look forward to you now supporting the complete and total deletion of the Congressional Black Caucus now that you're on record saying that you don't like identity politics. So
listen, if free people want to
live by the
associate,
sword, you die by the sword.
No, let me just say, because you brought that up. If free people want to associate and form whatever groups they want, that's perfectly fine.
Well, if free people want to reference statistics, they should be able to use whatever statistics they want.
All right, Charlie.
Let me just say, the only thing I'll say in response to what you said is you like to bring up the average number. Jeff Bezos and I have an average net worth of $50 billion.
All right. Charlie, I'll let you finish what you were saying, and then we'll go to Kyle.
So you mentioned the tax cut, which I'm really happy to talk about. 22 million families, so over 80 million Americans have an extra $1,000 in their pocket this year, thanks to the largest middle-class tax cut in American history. This is one of the most misrepresented pieces of legislation in our country's history. I have to listen to the Democrats time and time again say this just was a handout for corporations and a handout for the richest of these. That is incorrect. This is the largest, most successful middle-class tax cut in American history. Fact, a family of 4 with an annual income of $73,000, which is the median family income in America, saw a tax cut of more than $2,000, a 58% reduction in taxes thanks to President Donald J. Trump. And so you care about middle-class workers. I care about middle-class workers. President Donald Trump has actually delivered results and success for the people that we care about, the middle part of this country that trusted them with their vote for the first time in a long time. I'm so proud that this president is able to say, I've made life better for people that both parties have turned their back on for so long.
Okay, so here we go. Now, so if you want the truth about that tax cut bill, let's talk about it. First of all, will I give credit in certain areas? Absolutely, because I'm not a hack. So when it comes to, I'm not saying you are, by the way, I'm just saying that I'm not one.
Thank you, Kyle.
So the good parts of that bill, the child tax credit went from $1,000 to $2,000. That's something we can agree on.
Good.
That's a good thing. The standard deduction was increased. That's a good thing as well. By the way, I like how we're both super tall and these mics are so low. It's so awkward to have to
It's got to be like that presidential, keep leaning over, but whatever.
All right, so now let's get into it. That's the good part. That's the stuff I agree with. Here's the bad part, okay? In 1952, the corporate tax rate, it accounted for 33% of all federal tax revenue. Okay, you understand that? So the corporate tax accounted for 33% of all federal tax revenue. Today, corporate taxes only bring in about 8% of that federal revenue. So that means a giant tax cut for corporations. Trump looked at that and said, we should give them a bigger cut. So the rate went from 35% to 21%. That cost more than $1.3 trillion. Also, this bill scrapped a little thing called the alternative minimum tax. So what that means is that if there's a rich person who's got a team of lobbyists and a team of accountants trying to help them dodge taxes, okay? Let's say they get that rate down to 14%, their effective rate. The alternative minimum tax says, no, you have to pay a minimum of 25%. You can't deduct below that 25% number. This bill got rid of that because it wants the ultra-rich to take all the money and run out the back door. If this bill was not for helping the rich, then why is it that they took the estate tax, which only applies to people with goddamn estates, and they said, hey, $5.5 million is the line, how about we make that $11 million? So in other words, a tax that only impacted the rich, he said, well, let's cut that one quite a bit as well. And furthermore, and the most important point about this bill is that people making $75,000 a year or less will actually see a tax increase over a decade. So what happened was all of the tax cuts for regular people, all the tax cuts for you, they're temporary, but the tax cuts for corporations and the rich, they're permanent.
So
there's a lot there. Can I respond?
I'll let you respond in the context because we're going to stay on the economy because you've both addressed a lot of the key points. But one point
you don't even need to be here. We could just keep going.
Yeah. But one point we did not address is the deficits and the debt. So if you can just address that in your response as well.
I mean, you're going to find no disagreement that the debt and deficit is one of the most urgent issues of our time. And look, President Trump has submitted budget after budget to Congress.
Well, that was a pretty nice opening round there to a debate between Kyle and Charlie. And if I'm biased, I'm a Charlie Kirk fan. Don't want to admit it, conservative, obviously. So if I had to give an unbiased opinion, I'd basically say that Charlie always comes armed with facts and figures. And he puts them down there and he throws them out there. And they're right on. He's taking them right off of Google, does his research very well. I was surprised, though, Kyle came up with some of his statistics. And the first one, when he talked about the U6, well, listen, if that were me, you bring up the U6, that's fine. But then Charlie countered and came back and said, okay, even if I take your U6 rate, the unemployment rate under Trump on the U6 is still lower than what it was under Barack Obama. So there. I mean, so if you're going to go out there and try to counterpoint, you want to make sure that your counterpoint doesn't have a hole in it that can be exploited. So that sort of goes to Charlie. Then Charlie came out with his rounds of basically, how much was made during the Bush, $500 in extra income. During the Obama years, it was $1,000. Under Trump in 2.5 years, it's like $5,000. And if you cut in for the tax, the tax laws that were there, the Trump tax plans, there was some extra money inside there. But you're talking 5 times as much. Now, Kyle came back with his statistics and basically said, well, those things there's going to be a sunrise on those taxes where the tax loopholes or the tax breaks that are being given to the rich or to the corporations are going to stay. There is some truth to that. Now, the fact of the matter is, what will happen when there's a sunset of the tax plan in 2025, if they revisit it and do something, and then this whole thing about giving corporations tax breaks, I find nothing wrong with that as long as you're concomitantly doing the same thing for the middle class and everyone else. Now, that you would look at the number on the tax, on how much someone's saving, it's going to be relative, folks. I mean, in the millionaire range, in the multi-million corporation, you're going to be talking millions and billions of dollars. On the lower end, you're going to be talking thousands of dollars. So you could say again, well, the millionaire, he got a $100,000 tax break, and the average middle income person, or upper class or middle class person, only got a $5 or $6 or $7 or $8,000 tax break. Well, that's relative to their incomes that they're making, but they're getting a tax break. And whether it's to the guy who's getting a huge tax break in terms of overall dollars versus the middle class person who's getting a huge tax break overall in relativity to his income and his overall dollars, you know what, like I said before, it's all relative on where you were at. I would probably, if I had to give this boxing score thing, it'd be like 10-9. You know, Charlie came out top only because he put out more facts. The facts that he put out were solid evidence that what Trump was doing was actually working, energy independence, all that stuff that he did inside there, plus the fact of the matter that the U6 number was a big hole that Charlie exploited. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. Y'all know what to do. I'll leave you with my final thought, and that's going to be after you make sure that you take a look at the videos here and there. Click on them. My final thought, when you're right, you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.